Hello and welcome to this Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and recording for a podcast on the Serviced Accommodation Property Podcast. Today I'm going to be introducing or interviewing even Mark Ormrod, who is a veteran Royal Marine, and I'll let Mark introduce himself very shortly. But sometimes I'm doing podcasts and I will interview people, and this is going to form a bit of an interview, but also it's going to form a Q&A type session. Mark is a property investor himself since leaving the Royal Marines, and he's a buy-to-let investor to date, but also interested in moving into serviced accommodation. So Mark's going to ask me, well, he can ask me whatever he likes about single lets, HMOs, service accommodation, because I actually do all of those strategies. So we'll just play it by ear and have a chat. Some of you will be watching this live on Facebook and YouTube, etc. So if you are, then by all means you can type in any questions you have for me or Mark. But what I will do is I will come to those questions at the end once we have finished the podcast recording, and then go to any questions that you may have asked. So, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me back. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And so for those of you that haven't seen it yet, the last week's podcast, I interviewed Mark, and Mark asked me some service accommodation questions, which obviously I was happy to answer. And we ran out of time, so we decided to do a Mark Ormrod interview part 2, which this is. So hopefully we'll get through all of Mark's questions today on service accommodation and property. So let's not waste any more time, Mark, but can you please just explain a little bit about yourself and your journey and what's led you here as a property investor?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned just now, I'm a former Royal Marines commando. Joined the military at 17, straight out of school. Finished my training at 18 in 2001, and then was thrown in right at the deep end in Iraq in 2003. Came back from there, settled into the early part of my career like anyone does. And 2005, my daughter was born. So I left for a year to retrain as a bodyguard. I failed miserably as a civilian. It's a lot harder than I anticipated. So I went running back to the warm embrace of the Royal Marines in early 2007, where I was deployed to 40 Commando, who were already in pre-deployment training for a 6-month tour of Afghanistan. So settled in there nicely, got straight into the pre-deployment training, hit the ground on September 7th, 2007 for a 6-month tour. And halfway through that tour, Christmas Eve, actually, 2007, I was second in command of an 8-man patrol. Heading back into our camp, I made the mistake of standing on and detonating an improvised explosive device, which took off my right arm and both of my legs above the knee. So I went on a roller coaster journey of rehabilitation and recovery. Was medically discharged from the Royal Marines in July 2010, but I was very lucky. 4 weeks, I think, after I left, I was called up by a retired brigadier who was at that time the chief executive of the Royal Marines charity. He offered me a job, which I gratefully accepted, and carried out that job for the last 10 years. I actually just left that job a couple of weeks ago in January. But during that 10-year period, I started my property investing journey, if you like. Not in, I had no grand dreams of, taking over Plymouth and being numero uno or anything like that. I was just picking up these little bargains where I found them. I think I ended up maybe picking, I only have about 4, I think, over 10 years, but, they were they were right. The numbers stacked up. But I didn't really, I've never done any courses or training or anything. I just went down I'm assuming it's the traditional route of single residential buy-to-lets. They have gone up in value. Like I said, I was quite lucky. There's a mix of luck and, obviously doing the numbers to make sure that I bought them at the right price anyway. And now I've left. I've got a bit more time on my hand. I've been trying to look at other strategies. I'm aware that there are vast strategies out there, HMOs, serviced accommodation, which you specialize in, various ways to buy these properties without necessarily having a huge chunk of money. I've just bought another residential buy-to-let, but I had to find 30k to fund that initial purchase. And I know we've spoken between these two podcasts that there are a million different ways you can do that and buy property without needing that much cash up front, which I'm excited to learn about. But yeah, I just want to continue this journey. As a disabled man, I've spent 10 years with a boss, albeit a very kind, generous boss with a very flexible routine. I don't want to have a job as such anymore where I'm 9 to 5 and I have to be here and do that. There are a lot of complications, if you like, that come in my situation, medical appointments and that kind of stuff. So I want the freedom of growing my portfolio, creating that, I don't like to say passive income, but semi-passive income that comes along with that, and slowly and steadily winning the race if I can. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I call it, I agree with you. I don't call it passive income, because anyone that tells you that property is passive is selling you something that ain't true. Right. But I call it recurring income.
Okay.
And yeah, you can make it as passive as possible. But yeah, my journey, my history is definitely not making it passive. And whilst I was building up my portfolio in the army, and I was investing in property for 20 years of my 24-year army career. For the first 19 years of investing in property, I was not doing it right, and I definitely wasn't doing it passively. But okay, that's great. And so you're currently, you mentioned just now 30 grand was a deposit, or was that the deposit plus refurb that you invested in a buy-to-let?
So there was no need to refurb this one. It comes from tenants in situ. They moved in November. I'm literally making the exchange. I've got the tenants in there. The property is up to a really good standard. So it's just a turnkey investment for me. So it was, I think, so I bought, what I've done now is I've created a limited company. The limited company are buying the property. Now, I may have even messed up here, but, I had to pay stamp duty. I had to get a minimum of a 25% deposit, I was told, and then all the fees that are associated with mortgage brokers and solicitors, and it's just shy of 30 grand, I think, on a £92,000 property. So I'm here to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's standard. That's normal for people that just buy a property that's turnkey, doesn't need anything doing to it, and let it out as a buy-to-let. So ultimately, it's about what return on investment are you getting for your money. And if you worked out your cash employed versus the money out, it's a relatively small return on investment compared to other strategies. So that I currently do. So what is it that's interesting you in service accommodation? What is it that you want to know more about?
I just think really, I mean everything. Do you know what I mean? From the ground up, effectively. I understand the concept of it. I know what it's about, but like you just mentioned, I'm trying to make this as passive as possible. So I don't want to be investing in a property and run around every day changing the bed linen, or scratching everywhere trying to find tenants and people to stay there, guests. I really, what kind of makes me nervous is, and I know you write out terms and conditions and all that kind of great stuff, but I'm pretty sure I just saw a story recently in London where there was like a 130-man party in somebody's serviced accommodation that got shut down. So I guess all of it really. I mean, like, can you just turn maybe a regular 3-4 bed terrace property into serviced accommodation? Can you buy them already as serviced accommodation? The easiest route, I'm assuming. You know, I know some of the things you've been doing recently, which is really smart and inspirational, the way you're doing it. I mean, for my situation, what I'm thinking of, and you know Plymouth very well, and for anyone watching who knows Plymouth, the kind of Hoe and the Barbican area, I think, is where I'd want to be. If I was coming to Plymouth or passing through on the way to Cornwall, that would be the ideal place to stay. But, you know, I'd be looking at 1, maybe 2-bedroom apartments. Does that work with serviced accommodation? Is that feasible? Are you allowed to do that because there may be other tenants in the building? I don't really know, mate.
Yeah.
I just gave you a lot of questions there. Sorry.
No worries. So the properties that you've already got that you're using as buy-to-let would work perfectly well as serviced accommodation. So you mentioned that buy-to-let you've just bought. How many bedrooms is it?
It's 2.
Okay. And so I've got 2-bed houses that used to be buy-to-lets that are now serviced accommodation, and they're not fancy apartments by the marina. They're bog standard terrace properties, and they work really well as serviced accommodation. And I tell you, I don't actually go for properties that are going to be attractive to people who want to go out on a Friday and Saturday night. I will go for properties that are going to be attractive to a group of builders who want to rent somewhere for 3 months, not some hen party ladies or stag do lads that want a Friday or Saturday night. So actually, thinking outside the box is a little bit better. And when you do that, you have less competition. And I'll give you an example. So most people think, I'll just go and get a flat by the marina or a flat in the inner city and use that as serviced accommodation, 1-2 bed. Now that cannot accommodate 6 tradesmen who are looking for somewhere to stay for 3 or 4 months. Whereas your 2-3 bed house, maybe a 3-bed house, a little bit further out of the town centre, could. And they've got a vehicle. You know, they don't need to be right by the Barbican or whatever. They might actually be working on the outskirts of Plymouth on a project, or wherever the building site is, or whatever it is that they are doing. And by the way, it doesn't have to be blue collar workers, it can be white collar workers as well. You can have a team of IT people coming in and renewing the IT systems at Derriford Hospital or something like that, you know. So what we do is we try and target the much longer bookings. So actually, that's what I do. So the different strategies that I do is buy-to-let conversion to serviced accommodation, and they're just ex-buy-to-lets that I turn into SA. And all of a sudden, I'm not affected by Section 24, and I get to claim capital allowances. I do purchase to SA. Now, in fact, I have done turnkey, where it was just a 1-bedroom apartment. This is when I first moved into SA, because I was being taught when I first got into SA that SA was just 1- and 2-bedroom apartments by the water. So I went and bought one of those and just turned that into SA. Didn't need to do anything to it. Still got it, still use it as SA. But it wasn't until Section 24 started to take its toll, and you know, I was having to pay more tax on my buy-to-let income, and I realised that if I moved those buy-to-lets into service accommodation, I wasn't going to be affected by Section 24. It was only after then I learned about capital allowances, but that's another subject. Tens of thousands of pounds worth of tax-free income from the same properties. And so when I would get a buy-to-let back from a tenant, I would actually think, do you know what, I'm going to use this as service accommodation instead. And at the time I thought, do you know what, if it just wipes its face, I'm happy, because I'll be able to still offset all my mortgage interest. And I was actually a bit fed up with tenants, because when tenants trash your property and don't pay you rent, you're not allowed to kill them. So that's always been an issue for me. And so, yeah, every now and then you'd think you're getting this cash flow from a buy to let, and then a tenant doesn't pay you rent and you have to evict and all that. And guess what? You weren't earning any cash flow from your buy to let. Don't get me wrong. I've had plenty of really good tenants that have been my tenants for years and years and years. But every now and then you get a bad apple. That's just part of the course. So, but I would turn them into SA and just plug them into my channel manager and list them on the OTAs, etc. And I was amazed by the cash flow that I was getting from the exact same bulk standard properties, 5 times the buy-to-let cash flow. And that's on average over the course of a calendar year, average 5 times the cash flow. And then I could claim the capital allowances and not be affected by Section 24 and not have any tenants either. The management of the SAs fully outsourced to other people. So either my team of cleaners, laundry, handyman, and somebody just project manages that team, or I've even got SAs that I've outsourced the management to a local SA management company in that town. So I joint venture with some people who have gone through my training, my service accommodation training, and I've invested in their business. I've got property and I hand it over to them to manage it for me. That's 100% passive. And in some instances, you know what, they would actually do a better job than I would, because I'm spread a bit thin at times, and I'm thinking about, you know, podcasting and public speaking and doing social media and you know, my focus is elsewhere. So actually, sometimes if someone's got a bespoke service accommodation management company, give it to them. Let them do the marketing for it. Let them just be all over it. And so for someone like yourself, you could do purchase to SA, either turnkey or buy, refurbish, refinance into SA. Where you're buying it, you know, hopefully below market value, add value to it, get it all nicely refurbished, refinance it, and hand it over to an SA management company, for instance. Claim the capital allowances, you know, not affected by Section 24. Now, for people buying in a limited company, they're not affected by Section 24, but you don't have to buy in a limited company if you're doing SA with the property, because Section 24 does not affect service accommodation. So you can still buy in your own name. And so you can do purchase to SA and also rent to SA. But so you can rent a property with permission, use that as service accommodation. And actually, you can just hand that over to an SA management company as well. And if you want to know what property to go and get to do rent to SA or purchase to SA, ask the SA management company which properties they want more of, and they'll tell you which properties make them the most money.
So you go and find a property. So say I own a 6-bed property, right? You come to me and you rent my 6-bed buy to let off me for like £800 a month. I then give you permission to use it as SA, and then you go and sublet it out for £1,600 a month, but with my property. Is that right?
Nearly. So yeah, okay. your normal single let rent per month, if you were going to let it out to a buy to let tenant, is £800, right? Yep. Now, so I come along and I'll say, right, Mark, I'll rent it off you for £800, and I will keep it in show home condition. So you might be a landlord that's had bad tenants, you're being affected by Section 24, and you're pretty fed up. I come along and say, look, Mark, I'm going to keep it in show home condition. Do you want to come and have a look at any of my others that are kept in show home condition? You're more than welcome. Obviously, if you haven't got one, you might, in that situation, what you could do if you've got an SA management company is say, do you want to have a look at one of our others? And the SA management company, you just arrange with them to let the owner have a look at one of the others that's in between guests, return to show home condition. All right. So you can do that just to reassure the owner. But anyway, so I say to you, keep it in show home condition, and I'm going to use it as serviced accommodation. Now, I always tell a letting agent or a landlord that yes, I am going to be listing it on Airbnb and Booking.com. Okay. Now, here's the best way of getting a property on a rent to SA is you go and do some legwork in advance of going and speaking to the landlord. And let's say you've reached out to a building company who are coming to Plymouth to do a new build development, and you say to that building company, would you like to stay in one of my serviced accommodation properties? For 5 people staying in my property, the night rate would be X amount. They're going to get their own lounge, and they're going to get their own kitchen, and either their own bedrooms, or they could have twin single beds in the bedrooms. So you can actually reach out to companies and businesses, essentially getting them to say yes. If you were able to provide that accommodation for me, we would definitely be interested. All right. So there's no contract being signed or anything like that. Now, by the way, I'm happy to send you a flyer that I've got. There's a PDF flyer that you can actually send to companies, and when they say send me some more information, then you can say, yeah, there you go, the PDF flyer, and it shows service accommodation properties, and it shows the benefits of service accommodation properties. Okay, in over and above hotels. Or you could go as far as having your own website, and again, I can refer people to a really good website guy who will create you a website which looks like you're up and running already in advance of you actually getting your first property. Okay. So you can have that. But the beauty of it doing this way is then when you go to a landlord or a letting agent, you're saying, look, I want to rent your property off you to use as service accommodation for my clients who are ABC Construction Limited, who are coming to the area and they need a property to be serviced and kept in show home condition, etc., for the next 4 months. And that's the better way of doing it. And so if I came to you and said, this is why I want to rent your property, because I want to be using it for my clients, I'll keep it in show home condition. But out of the money that I get, now I'm not going to say to you how much money I'm going to get for the property. I'm just using it for my clients. Now, out of the money, let's say I'm getting $2,500 a month in from these guys. Out of that, I'm paying the bills in the property. So I'm paying the gas and electric, council tax, all that stuff, or business rates if I elect to go onto business rates. I'm paying the cleaners, paying for the laundry, paying the OTA commissions. The bookings that are coming in from the OTAs. I'm paying those commissions as well. So effectively, out of my $2,500, I'm giving you your £800 rent, taking out all the other bills, and what's left is mine. So either I'm going to be managing your property by renting it off you and managing it with my own team, or I'm going to come to you and rent it off you and actually hand that over to an SA management company, and I sit back, drinking coffee and let them manage it for me. So that's really clever. That's the way of doing it. You like it,
I'm loving that. I can see a lot of phone calls and wheeling and dealing to get it in place, but when it's in place and it's rolling, like you say, you're sitting back sipping coffee while the management company are looking after it for you.
And actually, if you get in with a letting agent, and I know a few in Plymouth, the beauty of this is that you set up a limited company, because you take the property on a company let by the letting agent. All right. So your company, Mark Ormrod Limited, Mark Ormrod Short-Term Accommodation Limited, whatever. You're taking it on a company let, and they can charge you referencing fees, whereas they can't charge tenant referencing fees anymore. It's actually costing letting agents 35% of their turnover, because the tenant referencing fees have gone, but they can still reference a limited company. Now, as long as your brand new company isn't likely to pass referencing, which letting agents are completely used to, all they then ask for is a guarantor. So either you stand as a guarantor, or somebody else stands for as a guarantor for the rent. So boom, it's past referencing, and ultimately that's how you get property from a letting agent, or you take it on what we call a management agreement if you're taking a property on a rent to SA direct to an owner. So company let agreement, letting agent, management agreement if you're doing a rent to SA direct to an owner. But like, as I said, the beauty for a letting agent is that all of a sudden now their owners are really happy because you're keeping it in show home condition, or the management company are. And when the letting agent is doing their quarterly checks, they're thinking, wow, I've never seen a property kept in such a fantastic state. And we are getting 10 out of 10 on every single score whenever our letting agents are doing their quarterly checks, or however frequently. There's some letting agents do it at different frequencies. So then they're sending it through to their landlords, who are thinking, wow, isn't this letting agent doing a fantastic job for us? And the rent's getting paid bang on. No, it's not late, and the property's in beautiful condition. And the letting agent's loving it because they're not getting calls from tenants saying, come and deal with this squeaky door, or what are you going to do about this, and what are you going to do about that? And the letting agent's got plenty of problem tenants like that, whereas you're not going to be that problem tenant.
Right.
So now the letting agent is motivated to give you more.
So I was looking since the last time we spoke. I looked on, because I didn't even know that you could buy properties on Gumtree and all of these things. I'm so, I think, stuck in the Stone Age with this stuff that I just used to look on Rightmove, and I found about maybe 4 what I think were HMOs in the kind of student area in Plymouth. I looked at HMO about 8 years ago, and I backed out of it. But I'm not sure specifically in Plymouth if that model for private landlords is dying, because they're putting up a lot of university-owned accommodation. But I can imagine you could turn one of those that's pretty much ready to go as SA already. Now, where my concern would be here, and I think I know the answer to this, is getting the bodies in there. So there was one I saw, maybe it was 175,000. I think it was a 6-bed HMO ready to go. So as long as you can sort the finance out for that, you then need to get it tenanted with the people. And so these management companies, are they very good at keeping them tenanted as much as possible, or are you going to have voids, or?
Right. So a typical service accommodation property has got about 70 to 75% occupancy. So this is all pre-COVID type stuff. 70 to 75% occupancy when it comes to short-term stays. If you start going above 80% occupancy on short-term stays, 2 night, 3 night stays, actually you're too cheap. You want to be putting your prices up. So we've tested this because you're going to be paying out a lot more on cleaning and laundry if you're getting loads and loads of short-term stays, right? So the sweet spot is actually stay between 70 and 80% on your short-term stays. Fine, if you get a 6-month booking, then that's going to put you well into the 90% over the course of a year, but that's fine. The long bookings are okay. But so just to answer your question on voids. Now then, me personally, I've got HMOs and I've got large properties that I could turn into a HMO, but I choose not to. So I've got 5-story properties over, 3-story properties, 5-bedroom, 3-story properties that could be a HMO, but they're not. I actually do whole house SA with those because they appeal to large groups of contractors. All right, so large groups of contractors can save a lot of money on a hotel, and they can stay for 6 months. All right. Now then, when it comes to a property that is already a HMO, then it's going to be either C4 or sui generis, and that's a specific use class which designates it as a HMO. So actually, if you wanted to rock up and start doing whole house SA, you need to get permission from the local authority to do that. They might either now I've actually asked for permission on my HMOs before, and I've been told yes, you can do it without the need for change of use planning. but they might say only if you change it to a C3 property. All right, to do whole house SA. Now then, what people get confused with HMOs is they think I'm going to get a HMO and then I'm going to let it out by the room like a guest house.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually naughty,
Oh,
because to do that with a property, it should be C1 commercial. All right,
okay.
because that's what guest houses, B&Bs and guest houses are. They're C1 commercial. All right. So I was actually, funnily enough, doing a mentoring call with a guy last night who has got himself into hot water with his local authority for doing SA by the room in a HMO of his. And I'm trying to help him out of that problem. He didn't attend my training or anything like that. This is just somebody that approached me. I think he said he'd seen a YouTube video of mine and approached me for help. So I did a free consultation call with him last night to try and help him out. But so ultimately, the point is, I would rather do whole house SA with a larger property rather than SA by the room. Now, obviously, I do SA by the room, but that's in an apart hotel model where I'm turning rooms into studio apartments. Already ensuite rooms, now turn it into a studio apartment by putting a little kitchenette in. So that is still a commercial property, but it is actually a hotel. Okay.
Yeah, I'm keeping up with you. I'm keeping up.
Right. So the point is with Plymouth as well is it's pretty much Article 4. Now, what Article 4 means is you're not allowed. It used to be a case where there's no Article 4, you can turn a normal C3 property, a house, right, into a HMO under permitted development. But Article 4 means you're not allowed to do that. You've got to apply for planning permission to turn a house into a HMO. And normally where Article 4 is in place, you won't get planning to turn it into a HMO. So this affects a lot of people doing rent to HMO because they can't get permission. The beauty of rent to SA is you don't have to apply for planning. So you can rent a house, a big house, and use it as whole house SA without the need for planning, because C3 is still the most appropriate use class.
Okay.
All right? Because you're doing whole house. You're not doing it by the room, and you're not letting it out to tenants. You're letting it to guests. So the beauty of doing rent to SA, in my experience, and I've done rent to HMO before, and I've still got the HMOs because I also went and bought them with a lease purchase option. But the beauty of doing rent to SA is, do you know what? You don't have to do stud partition walls, fire alarms, new carpets, repainting, rewire, fire alarms, all of that stuff, because you don't need to do that in an SA. You just need to make sure that you do a risk assessment for fire and stuff like that. So the way of thinking about an SA is it's just like a holiday let. If you went and stayed in a holiday let, it's just somebody's house that you are getting to stay in, or an Airbnb. It's just somebody's a flat or house that you're going to stay in temporarily. That's an SA. Now, so where that SA happens to be is irrelevant. It could be a 2 up, 2 down inner city terrace. It's still available for somebody to book on Airbnb and booking.com, etc. And either leisure guests or contractors are going to book it, basically.
So I never thought about it that before. I just assumed it would need to be somewhere pretty touristy, in the nicer areas, not on your regular street.
Which is more expensive and where all your competition is.
Okay.
So that's what everyone's thinking.
Yeah, you said earlier about white collar workers. We've got the big hospital, haven't we? The doctors, nurses that come from out of Plymouth to be there.
And what else have you got out near Derriford Hospital? What other business parks, retail
parks?
Science
Park. You've got the naval base, nuclear base. Students. I've just never really, like I say, I'm just traditional. Okay, you buy a house, buy to let it, and that's pretty much all you can do. I had no idea all these options were available.
What you can do is go to a local SA management company, and I can talk to you another time. It's a bit too long on this one to talk about that, but you can go to an SA management company and actually say, what do you think of this area? What do you think of that type of area? Would you be happy taking it on? And they're basically going to give you advice based on what is going to make them the most money, what's going to get the most bookings.
And I imagine they'd have contacts, landlords who are potentially selling as well, who you could just do a quick and easy deal with, maybe.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, they might even have, because a lot of them started off doing rent to SA, so they might have done rent to SAs with letting agents. But a lot of SA management companies, they don't necessarily know all the different tools of the trade that I know, because they don't have all the other ways of getting property that I know. So they might know that you've got to come up with a deposit and the first month's rent and furnish the property. Okay, so they might go and get more rent to SAs if they had the spare cash to go and do it, but they don't have that spare cash. But the letting agent would give them one if they went and said, "Oh, can I have number 27 Acacia Avenue?" The letting agent would do it. But say you come along and you can do that initial expenditure, but you're going to then take it from the letting agent and give it to the SA management company. Then the SA management company are going to say to the letting agent, "Yeah, we support this guy Mark. We're going to be managing the property for him." And then the letting agent's going to have the confidence to let you take it on a rent to SA.
Yeah. See, I've never heard of. I've got a letting agent. All my properties are let out through a really good letting agent here in Plymouth. But I've never heard of or actually seen a SA management company. I imagine there are some in Plymouth. I just don't know about them.
Yeah, I'll put you in touch with some. I've trained at least one of them. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
So I'll put you in touch. And so for people listening into this and watching this Facebook Live, if you go onto Google and you put in serviced accommodation, whatever town you're in, short-term lets, short-term rental, Airbnb, holiday furnished holiday let, that type of searches, but service accommodation should normally do it. And then scroll a couple of pages and you'll find an SA management company in your town. Okay. And if you don't, then there isn't one there. All right. The other way of doing it is you can find Airbnbs, and with Airbnbs you can message the Airbnb host and ask if they're a SA management company. And then that's how you can hook up. That's how you can hook up with them. But when you find the website, then you can obviously contact them via their website and basically ask them for advice on what properties they would like more of, and then you go and get those to hand over to them.
Got it. Okay. What kind of mortgage do you need? Is it a special product?
Yeah. So again, happy to put you in touch with a broker who will tailor a specific mortgage to you. You can actually get mortgages now that allow service accommodation and buy-to-let on the same product.
Oh,
okay, wow, so you've got the alternative of doing one or the other. So yeah, you just need a holiday let type mortgage.
Okay. How long have we got left, Kev?
A couple of minutes.
Can you very quickly
go for five more minutes will be fine.
Can you just quickly run me through? I know I'd say 75% of it, but the whole lease option purchasing thing, you know, how that works.
Yeah, okay. So this is the best way of doing this is it's like rent to rent with a lease purchase option in place. Okay. So the way you do it is you say to somebody, right, I'd like to lease your property off you and I'll give you X amount per month. And I'd like to right to buy your property, let's say anytime in the next 5 years for X amount. So let's say the property is currently worth £100,000. You say to them, I'll tell you what, I'll give you £110,000 anytime in the next 5 years. But in the meantime, this is amount I'll give you every single month in the meantime, with the right to buy your property for 110. And so what you do is, with permission, you use the property as, so I've done this with buy-to-let, HMO, and service accommodation, and a guest house B&B into a part hotel. Okay, so with permission, you're using the property however you want to use it, with the right to buy it at the agreed price at the outset, and you're leasing it in the meantime.
Now, if you came to me and say that you gave me that deal, you said in 5 years' time I'll give you 110,000, right? And then all of a sudden, in 5 years have gone, and it's worth 170,000, and I throw my dummy out. Where do I stand? Is it obviously legally binding contracts? And
well, your dummy's going to be on the floor getting dirty, and you know, and I'll pick it up and stuff it back in your gob without wiping it. people listening, watching this, they're thinking, what's going on? It's just an ex-commando talking to an ex-bootneck. Okay, so the conveyancing gets done from the outset.
From the day that, from at the beginning of the relationship. Okay.
That's right. And so effectively, it's all tied up from the outset. So the legalities, the conveyancing is done from the day at which the option goes live. So the seller would not be able to pull out of that contract as long as the buyer isn't in breach of contract. So the buyer says, yeah, I'm going to use the property as serviced accommodation in the meantime, but the buyer turns it into a sandwich shop. You know, that's a breach of contract. So therefore that it's all null and void. But as long as everybody adheres to the contract, then the seller can't pull out of that deal. And the beauty of it is, you've got the right to buy it at the agreed price, not the obligation. So if the property drops to 90,000, you don't have to buy it for 100. You can just extend the option period. You can negotiate that from the outset, that you can extend the option period until such time. So you can either give it back at the 5-year point, or extend it to maybe wait till the property appreciates in value a bit more.
Wow. It's so clever, isn't it? I understand now. I used to be a little bit like, why do I need to go on a training course? It's not that difficult. You get some money for a deposit, you find a house, you offer less than it is, you rent it out, you get a couple £100 a month, and you let it go up in value over 10 years. But the more I speak to you, and the more this stuff just blows my mind about the options available, and even the way you can buy properties. That I just thought it was all you have to go to an estate agent and, you know, get messed around for weeks on end, and, you know, phone calls backwards and forwards. But you can literally just go and knock on somebody's door. You know,
I've done it with guest houses. I've done it with guest houses, and I've said there was 4 guest houses in a row. I said, I'm looking to buy a guest house in the area. Do you know anyone willing to sell? And I was dragged across the threshold on all 4. None of them were for sale. None of them were for sale. Guest house B&B owners are desperate to get out, but they can't, because they've not been declaring their income, so they've ruined the commercial value of their property. So they can't sell it to anyone trying to buy with a commercial loan, and they can't sell it to someone who wants to buy it and live in it as a house, because it's a C1 commercial property and the buyer can't get a mortgage on it.
So how do you get the finance for that?
Because I can raise the finance. Well, there's different ways of doing it. Okay, so you can do. We've started a new loop. You can do a bridging. That's fine. You can do a bridge product. You can take it on an option. So this is my preferred one. You basically say, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you this much for it, but wait until I've done a refurb. So I'll refurbish your property. So let's just use some round figures here. They've been trying to sell it and they want 200,000, but they're struggling to sell it to get out. All right, because no one can buy it with a commercial, because all the buyers don't know any creative strategies. The buyers are just retired couple that want a guest house. Do you know what I mean? But they can't raise the finance to buy it. So I say to them, well, I tell you what, I'll take it on an option. So we'll agree 200,000. Let me get it refurbished in the meantime, and I'll give you your 200,000 and give you a year or 2, whatever it is you need. All right. So I didn't have to finance the purchase. All I've got to do is finance the refurb. Yeah.
Okay.
And then what you do is you get it refurbished, then get a surveyor in to value it at its new value, which is a lot higher.
Mhm.
Okay. Because you've basically turned it into an apart hotel. So you've converted the owner's accommodation. I showed you the one in Plymouth, didn't I?
Yeah. Yep.
When I was down at the weekend, you came and had a look. And
Yeah.
so we basically turned. Did you see one of the kitchenette rooms? You did, didn't you? On the
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so we put a kitchenette into an ensuite room, and the rooms that we showed you, one was the dining room,
Yep.
and one was the lounge, and it was all open plan. But one was the dining room, one's the lounge. So we put a stud partition in, and we put en-suites in there and kitchenettes in there. Okay. So that's 2 rooms. The owner's accommodation, there was some downstairs and some upstairs. We've turned those into studios. So we've turned what was previously a potential 10-bed B&B into a 16 studio apartment hotel. So
Wow.
imagine the commercial value of that now. Okay.
Mhm.
But all we've got to do is now we get it valued at its new value. And then with that valuation report, we say to our investors, I can buy this property for 200,000. It's now worth $1 million. Do you think you're going to have a problem raising 200 grand on a property that's worth $1 million?
I doubt it.
No. So you exercise your option to buy it. You get the 200 grand to buy it, and then you can't realize the full commercial value until you can provide a couple of years worth of trading account. So you might be giving your investors a good return on their investment for a couple of years or whatever, but ultimately back end the property's worth $1 million, and then you loan 70% loan to value against the $1 million.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and no one was exploited. The 70-year-old owners, in fact, the woman whose guest house it was that you came in, she was in her 70s and she'd been trying to get out for about 10 years.
So you helped her out.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
I only have one more question, right? Because
All
you
right.
talked about this, and I was telling my wife about this, and I actually drove past and showed her it all. I was so impressed with it all. In the old model of a B&B or a guest house, you would have a reception. You'd have someone there. They'd run around and make your toast for you in the morning. They'd be there 23 hours a day. How does it work now with the way you've set it up now? Do you have somebody on site? I know the laundry come in and out at certain times, but is there anyone as like an emergency point of contact that you need to employ?
You know, we took you through to the back bit out where the backyard is on
Yep.
the first floor. Yeah. So that's going to be lockable there, and there'll be a place there that somebody could stay overnight. So let's say Brittany Ferry comes in at 4 a.m. and we're getting 20 people checking in at 4 a.m. Yes, we can have somebody there to check them in and to make sure everything's tickety boo. But under normal circumstances, when somebody books a studio apartment, they book a studio apartment and they don't necessarily need someone to show them into a studio apartment. So people will turn up, they'll get the key code to get in the outside door.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't decided 100% on how we're going to structure this one, but ultimately they can have coded access or a key fob or a physical key. And they're basically told exactly where their room is, and they just go to their room. And they're booking a self-contained studio apartment.
Right.
So they're not expecting anyone running around after them in the morning doing them bacon and eggs, because that's what they've booked, a self-contained studio. So instead of having 16 studio apartments scattered around Plymouth, we've got them all in the one building with the economies of scale with that.
Yeah. Wow.
No need to apply for a change of use, because we took a guest house, a C1 commercial guest house. I think Sonny's asked a question, or somebody else has asked a question. I'm going to come to Facebook questions in a minute. But you're taking a C1 commercial property and you're keeping it as a C1 commercial property.
Okay. No more questions from me. I'm done. I'm frazzled, mate. Thank you.
Head blown. All right, mate. Well, that was really useful, and I really appreciate you asking your questions, because you're asking the questions that lots of people are thinking. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we've got a combined or joint history. We know the same people. We've got the same friends. And so yeah, I'm going to be. Somebody's posted on Facebook a question in a minute. I'll come to those questions in a minute. So I'm going to wrap up the podcast now and go to that, because I think the podcast has already gone to about 49 minutes, 50 minutes, which is fine. So that's absolutely fine. I'm sure our listeners really loved that episode and interview, Mark. So I trust everybody found that useful. I will be back in 1 week's time on the Service Accommodation Property Podcast. So here's to your success in service accommodation, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Okay, so we've got some questions that have come in, Mark. Let me just, so Robert Camilleri said, very inspirational, Mark, or very inspiring, Mark. So that's a nice comment. So I've got a comment from a Facebook user. So the platform I'm using, StreamYard, sometimes it's telling me who has posted. It depends what platform they're posting from. So, and it sometimes depends whether I'm friends with somebody on Facebook, but I'm getting questions coming in from multiple places. So for this particular one, I can't see who has asked the question. Apologies. But the question is, can you please explain to London Rent to SA, please? I bought the course and I need help to it. Now, I'm actually doing a follow-up tomorrow night for people who did my online training. I'm doing a live Q&A follow-up. So if you've done my online training, then you just go to the Service Accommodation Intensive Facebook group and comment in the comments whether or not you've done the online training, and then you can join me on the live Q&A tomorrow evening that I'm doing for that. If you've done the live course that we used to do before lockdown, then please type your question in there and I will cover that off. But I'd rather just do the live Q&A if that is you, if you've done the online course. So Sonny Green is X29 Commando. Have you met Sonny, Mark?
No, I can see his comment about the HMOs.
Oh, you can see the comments. All right, that's fab. So I've got 2 HMOs now in Plymouth. I've been looking at SA for some time. Like Mark says, flats with a sea view or something similar to your current project with self-contained units, kitchenettes is very appealing. Time to take the plunge. Yeah, absolutely, Sonny. So I've been trying to tempt you into SA for a while, and you've been keeping me at hand's length. You've been giving me a hand off, Sonny. So don't resist any longer, mate. Don't resist any longer. I don't think you've got any questions in there. You're just making a comment, so that's fine, Sonny. And someone else, what void periods can you expect and should plan for? Hopefully I answered that earlier on with the 70 to 80% on short-term lets. If you get nice long bookings, then it doesn't matter. You can be 100% booked. So somebody else has sent me a messenger. That's fine. I'll look at my messenger shortly. And what use class is apart hotel? That has been covered on the live, the use class of an apart hotel C1 commercial. So you're keeping it as a hotel. One of the things that you need to make sure with all the different movers in doing a project like this, you've got solicitors, you've got accountants, you've got the building control inspectors, you've got architects, you've got the valuation office agency who do either council tax or business rates. All of these different people, if they ask you, you are basically keeping it as a hotel. A lot of them seem to think, oh, I take it you're turning it into self-contained studios, and they think that you're splitting the titles of the property and creating separate units. You're not. You're keeping it as a hotel, because if you were splitting titles and turning them into separate units, that would be a huge expense and it wouldn't be worth it in my experience. It's a lot cheaper to just turn them into studio rooms and keeping it as a hotel. So that's just important point to make there. So thanks very much for tuning in this evening, everybody, those of you that have been watching it live. And thanks very much to you, Mark. Have you got anything to sign off with before we end this live?
No, you frazzled my brain. I'm just trying to decompress right now.
Cool. So if people did want to get in touch with you, how should they do that? What is your own podcast, by the way, if people want to check out your own podcast?
Yeah, I have the No Limits podcast. It's on all the normal platforms and YouTube, and I'm on all the social media channels. The handle
Is it No Limits spelt as normal limits?
so it's hashtag NOLIMITS.
LOMINITS.
No, it's just No Limits with a hashtag and no space.
LOLIMOT. I can't even spell it, but limit spelled normally, so no hashtag limits. Sorry, mate. Somebody told me that there's a limb reference before.
Yeah, when I first started it, because I made a documentary, it was LIMB, as in limb, but everyone kept calling it limbits, which makes no sense. So I put it back to the regular way, so people would stop saying limbits.
I'm glad I wasn't going mad. Because I was my brain was confused for a minute on how to spell limits.
No, so it was a play on words, but
right. Oh, understood. Okay, so your No Hashtag Limits podcast, people should go and check that out as well. And you interview inspirational people on your podcast, right?
I do, yeah.
So that's fine. I shouldn't have said you interview inspirational people because I'm trying to get on your podcast, but you interview ordinary people as well, like me, right?
So with inspirational stories.
Awesome. So yeah, hopefully I can get on your podcast at some point as well. So Robert said thank you for tonight. So some nice comments coming in. So thanks very much, Mark. I will see you soon, probably on Clubhouse.
yeah, probably.
And more than happy to have a chat and meet up for another socially distanced meetup in Plymouth, wearing masks and all that, just in case anyone was wondering. So see you soon, everybody. And here's to your service accommodation success. And remember, from the property soldier, your future needs you. I'll try and get the finger in. Take care, everybody, and good night.
See ya.